Neuro Creatives podcast with Josh Crawford.
Self-esteem and self-compassion are two completely different things. Self-esteem is your confidence in your ability to perform. Self-compassion is your ability to be gentle with yourself and treat yourself the way a friend would treat you and not judge yourself. With my own ability to feel self-compassion and not judge myself the way I did for the first 48 years. Yeah, it's really powerful. And when I talk to people about that, especially people with ADHD, people will say, yeah, I get that. I get that sort of self-criticism mode, which is on hyperdrive like the rest of our brains. And it can be kind of insidious. So that's why we need each other.
Welcome to the Neuro Creatives podcast with your neurodivergent host, Josh Crawford. This is a positive podcast where we believe in no judgment of self and of others. We remove the societal stigmas of can't and don't by focusing on strengths, mental wellness, and empowerment. Together, we are building a culture of safety and inclusion where no one has to mask.
Had to get that one spin in your chair down, right?
Is this, we're not publishing this as a webinar, are we?
No. Purely podcast.
Okay.
Yes, please. And yeah, I'm at my standing desk, and it's funny because I'm like, okay, I'm getting warm. I need to take my socks off at least. So,
I'm actually, I gotta show you my sweater. I gotta show you my t-shirt. So can you see how it's a brain? Oh, wait.
Is it the squiggle?
It's one line.
Oh, gotcha.
One continuous line of a brainstorm.
Nice.
I know. And
the person drawing their own brainstorm.
Yes. I didn't even think about how perfect it was to wear for
I love that. Can I keep all this? Is that fair? Is that or is it like, no, wait, we're gonna start here.
You can keep it because no mask.
I love it. Well, welcome, Judy Albers, to the Neuro Creatives podcast. I am super excited to have you here with us today. I just want to quickly touch on your bio. So everybody's already kind of seen your personality in the first, 20 seconds of us goofing around. Our calls never start how they're actually, our calls start exactly how every call should,
right?
Which is a little bit of fun, little bit of personality. Life would just be so much better.
And safety. Right?
Yes.
Because it's all related. Mm-hmm.
Yes. So currently, you are the Director of Research Enablement at I4CP.
Correct.
And
professional enabler.
Oh, I love that. And you and I have talked before, you're kind of in your third act. So let me hit on a couple of the other acts that you've done before, and then tell us a little bit about your third act, if you would, or how those three acts tie together. So as first vice president of learning technology for JP Morgan Chase, Judy served as the business owner for learning management systems to support 160,000 employees, 6 lines of business, and 34 stakeholder groups. No small task, right? During Bank One's years as a top-rated bank in training,
Top 100. Okay, I'll just tell you. So Training Magazine used to have a top 100, which tells you how old I am because now it's top 125. But when we debuted, we were the number 17 bank. And then the next year we were number 15, or not bank, company. Then the next year we were number 15. And the next year we were number 13. And all 3 of those years, we were the top rated bank in the training top 100. And we hadn't even ever applied for said award. Wow. There's actually a lot to that story, which was a very proud moment, including award scala. But there's a lot that has to do with neurodiversity in that story.
Do you want to dive in a little bit now? Because I'm going to totally forget later unless I write it down.
Yes, we can dive in now. I'll just finish off my bio. After banking, I went and became a consultant. So I served a lot of companies in the learning and development space and in the learning technologies space. And in my third act, I am doing whatever interests me. I worked for a company that had an AI-powered personalized learning platform for a while. Now I work for an HR research firm. And yeah, I'm a professional enabler, because if our research convinces you to do a thing, I am going to give you the tools and templates to help you do that. So if I take it back to that proud moment in my career, it was Bank One, and we applied for the training top 100. People would say to me, I worked at Bank One. How in the world did you get 70 training units serving 70,000 employees to get their act together enough to do anything together, like launch our first virtual university? And one of the things I realized is that, in hindsight, explained by neurodivergence, I've always sort of had this perseverance. If solving a problem matters, I will solve it. I will find any way to solve it. So many people talk about, I was thinking about Neuro Creatives, and I was like, you know what? My creative side is creative problem solving. And so the way that we got everybody to work together was to listen really carefully to what everybody needed, figure out where the common ground is. And I don't know why no one else talks about the Amoeba strategy. It should be taught in business schools, Josh. Oh, look at your face. He's so interested. The Amoeba strategy is apparently my original work, my original model. But all it is like, okay, you know where you want to get. We wanted to get all 70 training units working together. We wanted to be using learning technology as one company, and we wanted the company speaking with one voice to our employees instead of 70 voices for 70 training units. And so you know where you want to get, and you have to be so connected, always connected to everyone who is associated with the obstacle to your getting there. And so it's like you're an amoeba. You're sort of constantly, nobody really feels the amoeba pushing on them, but you're just like constantly touching. And then there's a moment when you're just talking to somebody and you go, oh, that obstacle got removed. I just found out that the obstacle that I thought was there is no longer there. Or they mention something that allows me to go, I bet we can remove this obstacle now. So the amoeba squeezes into this part, and it's not at all in the order in which you would have planned to do it. But eventually the entire amoeba gets there because you're so in touch with all of the people who are going to help you get there.
Okay, I love that. And that touches on so many of your strengths, knowing you personally, which we'll get into. Okay, the amoeba effect. Is that coined? Do you need to go?
Yes, as of now, Amoeba Strategy, TM, registered Judy Albers, September 9th, 2024.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for saving me in trying to read through your bio out loud, which is one of my kryptonites, but willing to try it. So diving in, what role does neurodiversity play in your life?
Explainer of all the shit.
Go on. Explain.
Okay, so I never would have said I had ADHD. I wasn't hyperactive, says the girl who spun in her chair at the start of the podcast. But I just wouldn't have described myself as having ADHD until I took a class with you and your friends teaching neurodiversity in the workplace. And I was like, wow, those descriptors actually really describe me. And for me, I think the explainer of stuff, it has a lot to do with having been a person who is both capable of being really high performing and like doing the impossible, the facilitating training governance for a highly dysfunctional organization and getting them all to work together. But ask me to take one project from start to finish and give you a project plan from Monday through Friday, and I'll be overwhelmed. And, I won't do it. And so there's this sort of, why am I so good at some things and so bad at other things? And I think a lot of people who never realize that they have ADHD, they just sort of say, oh, well, I'm strategic. That stuff's tactical, or I can't be bothered with those details. And what I think happens is if you're in a leadership role and you don't realize that you have ADHD, you're in a position of power in which other people sort of feel obligated to cover for you. And I find that once I realized that I had it, I was in a position of collaboration with folks where we're working together. And I always forget you're dyslexic, but I'm going to jump in and help with the reading of the bio, just because that's how we operate. And I think there is something about finding out that I had ADHD that and being open about it with folks, just kind of risky. To me, it is still a risky thing to do in the workplace.
Yeah.
I would say my results with it have been 50-50, half positive, half negative. And yet it's important for us to talk about. So I'm not going back. I'm not masking again.
I love that. For some people that are, I know a lot of people mask, so many people mask. It's over 70, I think it's close to 80% of people in the workplace. I can't remember what research this was. And I'm like, I think it's either higher than that because people aren't self-identifying to say whether they're masking or not. It's kind of,
Yeah, you might even not realize
right.
that I didn't know that I was masking.
Yeah, I didn't find out that I had ADHD. I suspected. My mom always told my brother and I that, no, we had you tested and you don't have ADHD. And later on, COVID hit, working from home, I get tested. And while I'm halfway through the test, walking around, clicking my pen, the person on the other end is like, are you pacing and clicking? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, can you please stop clicking your pen? So I'm like, okay, great. So I grab this, just my little fidget toy. And, right now you can't tell that I'm playing with it which is great virtually, but it was close enough to the microphone where she could hear the clicking. And she's like, what are you doing now? And I said, oh, I have one of my little fidget toys. And she's like, okay, technically we need to finish this test.
I'm just going to diagnose you right now.
But we don't need to. Right. So this was 2020. Yeah. So I knew about the dyslexia. And the thing is, I love you identifying that I was struggling with something, and I didn't have to self-identify and say, oh, it's my dyslexia. You, as the awesome person that you are, and extremely empathetic and extremely aware of other people, identified it and said, you know what, let me just take over for you. You don't have to. No one ever has to self-identify or should have to self-identify. That's one of the things we're working on. And, masking, so much psychological and physical energy that goes into masking.
Yeah.
One of my missions is no more masking. But for people that are masking, are probably thinking, okay, how safe or how unsafe is it for me to share at work? How did you start to do that? And what does it look like for that 50-50? If it's successful, what does it look like? If it's not successful, what does it look like?
Excellent question. And I can only remember the third question of the 3 questions. So,
how did you start unmasking?
Oh, I started unmasking because in my last job working for the AI company, my lovely boss would talk about his ADHD all the time. And I, of course, still did not realize that I had ADHD, but boy, did I really connect with that guy. Like we were tight. And so I had a role model I had somebody who talked about his ADHD openly, and he was a leader of people and highly respected in his field, and absolutely brilliant. And he was super open about it, which I thought was great. And I think that between that and realizing, gosh, I think you kind of nailed it. One of my core drivers is empathy with whoever is struggling for whatever reason, and like wanting to make it easier for them. And so, yeah, I think that when I realized that I am a person who I can tell a story in a sometimes rambling, sometimes compelling way, actually both simultaneously, like she's going to start on some tangent and you'll be like, what the what? And then it'll actually relate to the thing we were talking about. That story had a point. It was exactly on target. I had no idea it was going to go there. So yeah, I thought if I start unmasking, maybe it's helpful to other people who don't have an opportunity to be on podcasts with the amazing Josh Crawford and that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Same. So I unmasked at work. I was at a point where I know they're not going to fire me. I might not get promoted anymore. I'm a VP at a corporate, Fortune 200 company. I'm at a good place where it was more important to help others. And, I think there's so much empathy with neurodivergent people because we've all struggled.
Yeah.
And so I think that's universally, for the majority of us, one of our superpowers is because we've all struggled and we've hidden our struggles so we can identify when someone else is struggling.
Ooh, right.
Yeah, we have the learned experience. How we learn is we take a piece of information and we tie it back to an experience. And that's the connectedness that sticks it in your brain. If you hear information, but you don't have something to tie it back to, it doesn't stick.
And when you're, yep.
Right. Yes. Thank you. So, us sharing experiences, sharing stories, trying to tell other people what it was for us that created a safe space, or who it was for us that created a safe space. One of the other things that I'm trying to do is build a community of guides. I think the word guides is one of the easy, you don't have to be a mentor, you don't have to be a coach, you don't have to be a leader, you don't have to be a boss. You can guide anybody. You can guide a friend, you can guide a peer, but it's just, if you're familiar with the hero's journey, Yoda is a guide. It's
exactly. Yep.
We're not trying to be the Luke Skywalkers. We're trying to be the Yodas or the Obi-Wan Kenobis or whoever.
Yes. Or that wizard in the Lord of the Rings. Oh,
Gandalf.
Oh, the people who are like, it's Gandalf. I can't believe she doesn't remember. Okay, sorry to you people. I know that hit a nerve.
No. Well, okay. So here's the fun part for the people that either don't experience neurodivergent this way, that are neurodivergent, or the neurotypical people. When you said the wizard in, my brain already had 100 different images of Gandalf in the different movies, and the different Gandalf the Gray, Gandalf the White, Gandalf with Frodo, Gandalf. You shall not pass. All of that in between that 1 to 1.5 seconds of me spitting out Gandalf. I'm asking, did you similarly, were you also able to visualize 100 different images of Gandalf, but you just couldn't come up with the name?
100%, yeah, totally. And that feeling like, wow, do other people have to pick from 100 thoughts in that split second to decide which one they're going to verbalize? Oof, that can be exhausting, right?
Right. So it's not that I don't have the answer. It's that I have 100 answers.
Right. I have all of them.
Right.
It's not like I can't come up with it. I can't pick.
If you've never been to a Baskin Robbins and you walk in there and they're like 31 flavors, you're like, oh, I'm going to need to sample a couple of these. My brain needs to sample a couple of the answers before 100%. I spit out.
Yeah, exactly. I will always order a flight over a glass of wine, same thing.
A little sneak peek into our brains.
Mm.
Peel back the curtain. Okay, the other two questions. I love our tangents. What does success look like when you share that you're neurodivergent at work?
Thank you. Success when I share that I'm neurodivergent is when someone says, huh, tell me, and they ask a curious question. They approach it out of curiosity. So they'll be like, tell me how that shows up for you at work. Then they'll say, tell me how I can be the best colleague for you. And shout out to Colleen, my colleague at this job, who did exactly that. And she even said, I had some feedback for you about, so I'm always going to give a great presentation. And if you ask me 15 minutes before what I'm going to talk about, I may not be able to tell you. And that is really nerve-wracking for a lot of colleagues, and it's not fair to them. And so I was causing her stress because she would say, I just need to know. I just need, A, to know more in advance, or B, Judy, can I help be your timekeeper? So we'll say that I'm going to speak to one of her clients for an hour. I'm going to give them a research briefing because we're a research firm. Well, I bought this little timer. And of course, I bought the first grader's timer where the remaining time is a rainbow.
Love it.
But I had to have it in front of me. And so it's become a running joke. And what's interesting, another thing that success looks like for me now is that whenever Colleen and I get together and we do a briefing, and for us, we're going to brief the senior HR leadership team at one of our member companies. We're an HR research firm. And so to be able to say, oh, wait a minute, Colleen, I think we have, okay, that was 12 minutes. I think we have 48 minutes left. Let me set my timer. And then I show it to people and mention that I have ADHD. I think that those little things and the moments when people come back and they go, thank you so much for mentioning it, that we need to just normalize neurodiversity. If you don't normalize it, there's an awful lot of shame that we all place on ourselves for neurodiversity perceived as an excuse, perceived as a character flaw, perceived as lazy, perceived as spacey. And what success didn't look like for me was being told, okay, I would like to support you. And I really want to make sure that your ADHD is, never used as an excuse. And it just makes me so like, it's a reasonable thing to say if you're not neurodivergent, but there's something about it where like, how is it not an excuse? Like, I'm going to do something differently and it's in a way that you might not like. And I don't know how to even talk about ADHD in a way that a person who's predetermined to see it as an excuse doesn't see it as an excuse. So I feel like when you're told, as long as you don't use it as an excuse, it comes off as, so I need you to mask.
Yeah.
That's how
it's very indirectly saying that. Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you flip that to anything else, the thing is, I think neurodiversity is still so new. People can get away with saying that, where they wouldn't be able to get away with saying that in other situations.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and maybe they've also run into other people that, some people just make a whole lot of excuses or they refuse to be accountable, for something. And so, maybe you've known somebody who did, who I think that's what the balance is. It's like, I want to be able to explain why certain things are so hard for me and why it's in everybody's best interest to accommodate that rather than expect me to slog through the thing that is incredibly hard to do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I want to get that part of it across, where we're working together. Accommodation means we're all playing to our strengths. And so, yeah, does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. It's so many things went through my head, and this is usually where I'm like feverishly trying to take notes. But so, yes or no question. Are you and I the same person?
Yes.
No two people. So even if you, all right, so if you know a neurodivergent people or someone with ADHD, then you know one person with ADHD. You and I are very similar, but we get along so well. So yes, we share a brain sometimes, but that doesn't mean if someone knows you and your experience with ADHD, and then they find out that I have ADHD, it's going to be the same.
No.
So my brother was
Yeah.
2 years ahead of me in high school, and okay. Teachers would be like, and we have, the last name is Crafford, Crafford. So they're like, wait a second, are you so-and-so's little brother? And I'm like, yes. And they're like, no, you better not be trouble. And I'm like, so I'm already prejudged.
Yeah.
So, because yes, we grew up in the same household, we share the same last name, but we are completely different people. Now, except for supergluing my freshman high school science teacher to his stool, outside of that, I was a pretty good kid. And especially after that, because he kicked my butt into shape and
became your guide.
100%. Yes. That was one of the most pivotal moments in my life. And I went back and thanked him years later. My brother set the chemistry table on fire. You know, they say that they have a coating on top of it, and it's a fireproof table. And he's like, Bunsen burner, let me try. The bottom of it, obviously they don't coat the bottom of it.
An experiment.
He did, yes, just doing it with fire. So anyway, you know, those Crawford boys. Anyway, sorry. So yes, if you've met one neurodivergent person, then you've met one neurodivergent person. The other thing is, if you've met a successful neurodivergent person that has figured out how to survive and thrive in a neurotypical world, because neurotypical is the status quo, we have to rethink and reframe and reprocess and strategize, find problems. We're problem solvers.
Yeah.
Because we have had to figure out how to survive in a world that wasn't built for us. So if there's any successful neurodivergent people out there that their boss or their company or whoever, once you mention, hey, I'm neurodivergent, they should celebrate you that much further, because it took you that much more to get there than the other people.
Yes, that's so interesting. That's the very same people who were called lazy actually have worked so hard to be in a place where a neurotypical person can call them lazy.
Yeah. So quick example of what that might look like is, hey, I need you to draft me an email that I can send out to the 6,000 employees in this division. Great. I will get that for you as soon as I can. And then 30 minutes later, they're like, hey, where's that email? I'm like, yep, I'm on draft number 7. Because I'm dyslexic. But unless I tell them, or even if I do tell them, or because I don't mask and I am open about it, I'll say, yep, absolutely. Give me 15 to 20 minutes. But then I go to people on my team that I know my challenges, and I hire people around me that I know their strengths and challenges. So we all complement each other, right?
Yes.
So united, we're stronger together. And I have 2 or 3 people that I could ping and say, hey, I need help on this. Here's a rough draft. Can you clean it up so that it can go out to a broader audience? And like, yep, absolutely, 100%, got it. And then they'll ping me however long later and say, hey, here's a problem. No one can figure out how to solve it. Landed in my lap. How do I approach it? I'm like, yep, gotcha.
I think that's what you unlocked for me just now. The secret to success is surrounding yourself with safe people who have the skills that you don't, and who appreciate what your superpowers are. The number of times I get told, you just saved me 100 hours of work, like, wow, if only I had known this earlier. And so, yeah, to be able to just walk in, look at any complicated situation and go, here's what's missing, here's what needs to be done. And I can explain to you why and what the research is behind it, because that turned on a connection in my brain. And so I'm in hyper-focus mode. And then if you say, what was the first question I asked you? I have no idea. But yeah, I think that really, the times when I've been in a flow state where I feel like I am just contributing so much, it's really because we are contributing so much, and we all have exactly the right division of labor and way to bring in each other's strengths.
Yeah, I love that. So you kind of touched on this, but when did you start to learn about neurodiversity?
Only about 2 years ago from you, because you were putting together a neurodiversity at work class and you let me be part of your pilot program. So yeah, 2 years ago, maybe 3 now, who knows?
And still running classes, very successful. It's through UConn. So UConn Center for Neurodiversity, if anybody is interested. Judy Riley, who runs that center, is my next guest.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I have to say that as a training and development professional who has a master's in instructional design, I hate taking classes. I am the worst student. I am so impatient, and because I'm constantly like, oh, here's how you could do that better. And I didn't have any of those moments in your neurodiversity at work class. It was just, maybe it's the best class I've ever taken. Man, I can't recommend it highly enough, because I would be constantly thinking about it, and, to stop and be the cognitive scientist, amateur cognitive scientist that I am, the way that all of our brains learn, not just neurodivergent brains learn, is that first you have to get people's attention, right? And then you have to make them feel something. I mean, emotions really govern. It's the AGES model, AGES. So it's attention. You need to give them a chance to generate a new insight. And in your class, we were always applying everything that you talked about to our own lives. It was constant aha moments, constant new insights. And it really, I mean, I don't think there's a single person who didn't cry at some point. And because there were powerful emotions, they didn't cry because it was a miserable class, but it brought up powerful emotions, lots of joy, lots of feeling like, wow, I never knew why that was a struggle, whether it was for me or for my loved one, and when you find out why, it's amazing. Oh, and then the spacing, that's the S in the AGES model. So attention, generate new insights, emotions, spacing. If you do those 4 things in a class, you're setting it up for our brains to learn more effectively. And because this was spaced out over a period of weeks, it could simmer. I'd generate all kinds of new insights before the next session.
Intentionally planted.
Yeah, I didn't mean to I feel like you don't need a commercial in your podcast now, because that would be commercial for Josh's class.
It's UConn's class. So I was honored to partner with such a phenomenal group, the UConn Center for Neurodiversity, and have the opportunity to help. I co-created it, and they've taken that and made it so much more. And now it's not a commercial, but now it's also offered digitally. And I think there's 8 different modules. So whether you're a manager, whether you're a coach, whether you're an HR person, whether you're hiring, it's here's how to do all these different things to be successful and inclusive of neurodivergent people without people having to self-ID. If they do self-ID and there's programs, great. But it's just the awareness, because not everybody in that class was neurodivergent or had neurodivergent people in their lives outside of me and some of the other people that would have invited them. I think the emotion, and this is how powerful and why it's so important to have an inclusive environment. The emotions to bring tears to adults while they're at work in a corporate learning course, because they can go back to the time where they finally felt included and they could share openly that I have whatever.
Yeah.
And people accept me, and people are able to focus on my strengths instead of my challenges.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. Speaking of powerful, do we have time for your question? One of your questions is, most people have a pivotal life-changing moment before the age of 10. And I'm like, why is he asking this question? Why do most people who are neurodiverse, most people, period?
It's funny because I do have some standard questions like, look, we pick from any of these that you want to do. We can skip some, we can go some. And the neurotypical people that I've talked to have on here haven't really had that before the age of 10. So I'm learning, I'm doing my own, research now, but because of school, and school is the most difficult thing for neurodivergent people because it is in such a standardized box that usually we start to struggle with reading or with math or with sitting still, paying attention, don't doodle, don't daydream, don't spin in your chair. That's usually for neurodivergent people somewhere between kindergarten and 5th grade. Usually it's around 2nd grade.
I mean, more for the hyperactive form than the inattentive form, you think? At least for ADHD, because I feel like I didn't have that. I didn't.
You want an interesting part here. I was just on a different podcast, and what I forgot to mention, what I didn't, because we were talking about ADHD a little bit.
Yeah.
Boys, especially when we were younger. So I don't want to, generalize or characterize or anything like that. Boys get away with being hyper more often. And there's a period of time where it's like, okay, you should start to learn to settle down. You should start to learn the classroom rules. And the boys that don't settle down and don't calm back down because of hyperactiveness usually get identified as ADHD. Girls are usually taught societally much earlier to sit still, to pay attention, to be proper, more than boys. Growing up, it's like, oh, he's just a hyper boy. It's my brother and I, oh, they're just hyper Crawford boys. Girls learn to mask. So the number of women that go undetected is higher than boys. So where you're talking about the hyperactiveness versus the inattentiveness, it's the same for boys and girls. Research says it's the same, but who learns to mask faster and earlier because of societal norms?
Oh, I think you're right. Right. Because I didn't struggle in school. My friends would just get so frustrated that they would pay attention in class and study really hard. And I'd study the night before and I'd get the A. And then I wouldn't remember it. Thank goodness I didn't grow up in Europe where you have an end of year final to see whether you learned everything the whole year, because I could do it long enough to pass the test, right?
Yeah.
And so I could jump through all the hoops and perform all the tricks and, pattern match and do all this stuff. So they had me skip a grade. Nobody ever said I had ADHD. And the other thing that I never, didn't come to terms with for me. So I think for me, the pivotal moment for the age of 10 was actually before the age of 18 days. 18 days old is how old I was when I was adopted. And so I was one of the million children of the 1960s who, woman gets pregnant. It's before Roe versus Wade. It is after the sexual revolution. There's no option other than to go away, have the baby, and give it up for adoption. And so my birth mom had me, never got to hold me. And that broke my heart for her when she told me that. And it was a long time before it broke my heart for me as well. And I think that separation, when a child isn't verbal yet, or it's pre-memory, you don't know why you are the way you are, but I will tell you, it took a shit ton of therapy in my life to realize that it was okay for me to actually feel things instead of just try to explain why everything was happening and why everyone else was doing something. And I was just so incredibly disconnected from emotion, from my own emotion, very connected to other people's emotion. But a lot of that connectedness to other people's emotion, the good side of it is you want people to feel safe, and you're going to go out of your way to make an environment for them to feel safe. The bad side of it is because you have not felt safe. And so we just sort of internalize everything. So many people with that kind of childhood trauma have TMJ issues because we've been clenching our teeth. For me, I think ADHD really helped a lot because there was this combination, there was a huge lack of self-compassion side of me. I felt really high self-esteem. And one of my therapists said, Judy, self-esteem and self-compassion are two completely different things. Self-esteem is your confidence in your ability to perform. Check. I've got self-esteem. Self-compassion is your ability to be gentle with yourself and treat yourself the way a friend would treat you and not judge yourself. And so here we are talking about how, one of the things we like about each other is that we don't judge each other. But it took me until, late 40s to learn not to judge myself as harshly. And I think part of it, comes from having ADHD. Part of it for me came from adoption. Like, I never saw anyone, I didn't know anyone who shared genes with me. So I thought that every single aspect of my personality was a choice, was character. It was a test of character. I couldn't say, oh yeah, I'm always late, but Uncle Joe is too. When I met my birth mom, she's going to kill me. When I met my birth mom, she was working on her taxes from 3 years prior. And she was like, it's okay, they owe me money, which is not how it works. But I get it. I mean, I get it. And when I met my birth mom, my husband had a list of questions. So I left the room to put the kids to bed. My husband pulls out a list of questions and he's like, I would like to ask you some things. And she's thinking, oh no, he's going to ask why? Why did I give her away? What? He's going to ask really deep questions. And his questions were, Anne, when you pull weeds, do you throw them over your shoulder and leave them there for a week, or do you pick them up? It was, Anne explained, my ADHD wife, to me, explained to me how annoyed I should be with her. Like, was she genetically this way? And so yeah, I think when you, okay, I'll tell you my absolute most traumatic stories, not on this podcast, but yeah. I will tell them all in a way where there's something hilarious in it. And to go back to, I was trying to be serious, but when you don't know what aspects of yourself are genetic and you can't help it because we're all this way, versus, like you and your older brother, that certain things run in the family, versus, nurture of, well, you weren't raised to behave this way. So I believed that every single flaw in my personality was personal, was me being stubborn, lazy, unwilling to change. And so really, really negative self-talk comes from that. And I think that I wanted to just make sure that we covered that, because that's been one of my biggest aha moments, the combination of finding out that I have ADHD and coming full circle with my own ability to feel self-compassion and not judge myself the way I did for the first 48 years. Yeah, it's really powerful. And when I talk to people about that, especially people with ADHD, people will say, yeah, I get that. I get that sort of self-criticism mode, which is on hyperdrive like the rest of our brains. And it can be kind of insidious. So that's why we need each other.
Definitely. I wish you were here in person. I'd walk over and give you a big hug.
I know, I can tell. I can feel it. You.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
You just opened so many doors for so many people who have felt the same way, but didn't know why, or didn't know how, or didn't know the difference of self-compassion. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thanks for making this space for us to have.
Can I tie on another question to that of who helped guide you through it?
Oh, who guided me through it? I am going to shout out to my friend April. April also has ADHD. April also is able to accomplish like way, way more in a day than I am able to. But she's one of those people that I think when we meet each other, when you meet someone who has maybe the same sort of neurodivergence that you do, like when you said, are we the same person? I was like, yes. And if April said, are we the same person? I'd say yes. There's that connection, I think, that you feel where we're the same in so many ways that we've never been able to explain before. And April has just done the work. That's another question. People go, when people say you have to do the work, what does that mean? I had to get ChatGPT to tell me what it means to do the work. But the work is really processing the challenges and the trauma that you've had in your life, and being able to come full circle with it. Like the fact that I can talk about how I never felt my emotions.
Yeah.
I could go through 45 minutes of therapy and my therapist would go, you didn't never once told me how you feel. Not a single time. And now I can say, Josh, boy, this thing happened and I just feel really sad. And that's just it's a huge, also, we have issues with emotional dysregulation when you have ADHD. So it's that much more intense. So yeah, shout out to April because she did the work before I did. And we have the kinds of conversations that you and I have. And thank you to anybody who happens to be still paying attention to our rambling Judy Josh discussion of ADHD.
I'm enjoying it. Even if no one listens,
I had a great time.
Yeah. What is something that comes easier to you than others? And how did you figure this out? So we're kind of talking strengths.
Strategy and pattern matching. So I'm really good at Boggle. But somebody will give me their 10-digit phone number and I'll go, oh yeah, it's da 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 da. There are certain things that are just really easy to remember. And I think that it's also making connections between disparate thoughts and experiences and people. It was interesting when you said to me earlier that you thought one of my superpowers was networking. And I did the Gallup Strengths Finder. And one of my strengths was input. And input means that you have a fascination with more. So input, like a lot of people for whom input is a strength, they're collectors. And I was like, I'm not a collector, like stamp collections, coin collection, like how boring is that? I thought they blew it on input. That assessment wasn't right. Except then I was like, ooh, what I'm a collector of is people and ideas.
100% see that. Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I can bring up any topic to you and you're like, ooh, I know someone that's either an expert or works in that field or does that.
And that person feels safe. And I'm going to introduce you because we found a connection.
And then the thing is, you're great at making introductions, which then again builds your network. And so the ripple effect is, and then you and I met and I've introduced you to some of my friends and, so it just builds and it builds and it builds. But with your steel trap of a brain, except for the word Gandalf within a half a second, which you would have gotten to.
Thank you.
It's funny because I think it is one of a neurodivergent strength, not in everybody, but it's one that commonly comes up is, yes, we are able to see a bigger picture and we're able to make connections, non-linear connections, because we've always had to do that in order to problem solve and figure things out.
Yeah.
The other part, and you touched on it, is we don't judge. You create an extremely safe place, and you demonstrated it. You told a story that you could have had it gone one way and had a lot of people in tears, but you went another way and you had me laughing because you're throwing weeds over your shoulders, and I can totally picture you doing that. And little chunks of dirt going flying, and then because it's behind you, out of sight, out of mind, you're like, oh, look, this looks great. All right, gloves off. Come on, dogs. Let's go. Yeah. And not like University of Georgia dogs. You have a couple of Malinois.
Malinois. Do you know when I made my LinkedIn profile, I said my mission was ridding the world of boring training. I mean, that's an ADHD profile if I've ever heard one.
I love that. So closing tradition is to do a fun little creative mashup of 2 words that were left by the last guest. And then you'll get to leave 2 words. You can text it to me. Your 2 words that you need to use in kind of the context of what we were talking about are complex simplicity.
Oh, that is my MO. That's how I sell myself to get gigs and jobs. And well, I mean, that's what, when you're in learning and development, when you get a master's in instructional design, it's because you are a sense maker. You can look at a really complex body of knowledge and you can come up with something simple. And that my driving desire is to be helpful and useful. And for me, that means professionally, I want you to have a lighter cognitive load. Anything that I can do to unburden your cognitive load, I'm going to take the complex and make it simple. So thanks for that easy fly ball.
It's funny because the person that left it was like, someone's going to have fun with that, not thinking that it was going to be as easy. Probably.
Easy. That's not hard at all. But that's exactly why we all need each other. We need to be open with each other, meet each other, and just really bring in all of our neurodiverse strengths.
Yeah. And neurotypical acceptance, right? It's the diversity of thought. So it's,
yes.
What I didn't get into, I might have to have you back, because one of the things that I talk about in some of the keynote talks that I do is the difference of AI and neurodivergent thinking. And the World Economic Forum identified, here's the top 10 job skills of the future. that more than half of the workforce is going to have to get reskilled or retrained on, because these are things that AI can't do.
Can't do. And guess what? It's sense making.
It's the strengths and the skills that come much more naturally to neurodivergent people. So
yeah,
we'll get
because
into
AI
that
was
sometime.
patterned after neurotypical brain connections.
Right. Go figure. Judy, it has been an absolute pleasure. It is always fun talking with you. I always learn something new. There's always some type of emotional connection there that you bring in, and story and laughter. And just thank you for being you. You're awesome. I appreciate you.
Yeah, to Josh, thank you for having the wherewithal to actually make a podcast. And all I have to do is show up and have a great conversation.
Love it. All right. Well, until next time, thank you so much. All right. Take care.
Bye, Josh.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening. You are honestly the reason that this podcast exists. If you'd like more information on today's guest, please see the show notes. Also, add a comment to let us know your thoughts. And please subscribe.